Good evening and welcome to the Drive at 5 on intellectualradio.com/iHeart radio station. I'm your host, Roman, and we have a terrific show planned for you today. Don't forget to join the Drive at 5 after the drive with Warriors Talk with my girl, Rochelle. Tonight, my guests are poets, and sometimes they're poets and don't even know it. So we're going to go down the list, starting with you. And please give intellectualradio.com/iHeart radio station your background. Introduce yourself.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here today along with my other fellow creatives. My name is Renee Nolan. I am a poet. I've been writing my whole life. It's been therapeutic for me, reading and writing. And because of my love for writing, it became a passion of mine to actually publish a book. And in 2018, I was able to pull together a variety of things that I had written over the years. And specifically, I looked at things within an 8-year period, and I was able to self publish my book, Oh, the Places I Have Traveled. Um, and it is a compilation of poetry, short stories, inspirational quotes, and photographs from some of my photographer friends. And by the name, people think that it is a book about the places that I have physically traveled to. And as much as I love to travel, I have not traveled enough to write about it. But it is about my journey in life. And it deals with a lot of things that we all deal with, such as love, loss, community, heartbreak. I will be honest, there's a little sci fi in there as well. But this is my passion. In addition to being a writer, I by day I'm a banker, and I am also very active in my community. I am a community organizer, so I do a lot of things.
Okay.
My name is Isa Umi. My journey has been, I started out as an extremely introverted child. So, but I always like to write. I always like to read. I wasn't a writer, but I knew how to write. I wasn't, even though I was introverted, I wasn't like, I had a good command of words. I just was not comfortable in my own reality in terms of being able to have a conversation like this. So my journey to poetry started with drama. I got introduced to drama first, and that was a segue into writing. I went back to junior college. I got the guy of service, and I used to write theme papers for uh, people who were my co-workers. And one of the people I had one time, he said, "Have you ever thought about writing poetry?" And up until then, I had never thought about writing poetry. But I wrote. I always liked writing. I always liked reading. I always liked writing uh, about things, right? So it was a natural thing for me in my journey. And then plus, I'm a Gemini, so it fits into my communications journey.
I'm a Gemini as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
My name is Jose Popoca. Not really sure. I guess the only thing I can think of why I started writing was when I was a kid. My dad had brought like a whole bunch of books from like the swap meet. It was like these crates and boxes, and I didn't like any of them as I'm rummaging through them. And then I found this one book that I was too young to even understand, but I just knew I really liked it. And that's kind of how I kind of started writing or really digging into it, just very briefly. It's been a transition throughout my entire life, but it's been one of the few constants. So just writing, even if I ignored it for years or a year or two, but then I'd always come back to it. So that's kind of how that went about.
Poetry is a universal language. Everybody identifies it, but however, there is some concrete barriers to tell a story. Information. Give us a brief example of your specialty in poems. Is it informational? If it's culture, or is it smorgasbord of everything? Starting with you, sir.
Um, that's a really good question because I don't know if I have a specialty. I think for the most part, I just write things that just it had a specific energy to them. And then whatever that may be, I kind of dig into that. And then that kind of leads into this whole web of things, whether they're images, emotions, or thoughts. And then from there, that's where I kind of get the basis of it. Um, but I can't think of anything that I really. I'm sure there is a theme of sorts, but some of them can be very. I think. Well, I guess one thing I think that is, but I don't know if it's the right way to say it, but somewhat spiritual. Some of the experiences that I've had with medicine ceremonies or even through meditation have inspired some of the ideas within them. So,
Hmm.
So I think that, well, as I was sharing with both Pearl and Renee today, and I've shared with this with other people, um, in my journey as a poet, and in my journey as an actor, or I don't even call myself a poet no more. I call myself a comedian because that it came to me that I didn't want to be called a poet because when it wasn't that I had an aversion to it. It was just that when I came out, a lot of people done poetry, and then they would ask you, well, when you do open mic, how do you want to describe yourself? And so sometimes I found people would be over loquacious in terms of describing themselves. So I decided it came to me at a point that I didn't want to put down anything that was untrue because I wouldn't want to have to live up to that. So I wanted to be able to be clear about what it is that I. But yeah, I am a poet. I like writing. I just like the lyrical part of poetry. And then I think I was really turned on by Dr. Maya Angelou because she said when
Mm.
she was uh, uh, sexually abused as a child, a teacher at school brought her and introduced poetry to her. And she said poetry was music written for the voice. So I think of poetry like that. I don't think my poetry, I think the underlying theme in all my poetry is relationships. I'm always questioning the quality of relationships. And I was taught that at some point, I think an artist never stops dealing with the same thing. I think whether it's poetry, or whether it's any kind of art, you probably find a different way of expression, a different voice, or a different vehicle to express that same thing, but it's a variation of it. So all my poetry has to deal with relationship, whether it's the quality of my relationship, the who, what, when, and why of relationships.
Mm. Wow. And I guess I'll piggyback on that because it's a little bit of everything they said. But what I found is that writing has been therapeutic for me. So there's not necessarily a theme other than what's going on, what's affecting me at that point. And it might be me as an individual. It may be somebody close to me because there are some poems that I've written, and it was because of people in my life may have been dealing with certain challenges. And as I was trying to console them, I came up with a poem that put some of what I wanted to say to them actually in writing. The other part of it is that sometimes I may be influenced by things going on in the world because we were just talking on the ride over here about everything that's going on in the world, and sometimes we can feel that in our energy. And that's why I believe a lot of the things that I write are very relatable because it's not just things that may be affecting me. We all deal with love, loss. There's things in the world in our community that makes a difference to us. And so people quite often read some of my pieces and they're like, yeah, I can relate to that. Or they want to know, what were you thinking? What were you going through when you wrote that piece? And it opens up a conversation. So I love that part of it as well.
How did you guys discover your voice when it comes to poetry? Saying, this is my voice. I'm going to stick to it. Starting with you, sir.
I don't know how to answer that. I just think that once I started writing, one of my first poems I wrote, it was one of those long rambling poems where everything was rhyming, and I got a chance to do it. I work in theater, so there's a little theater. It's no longer there on the south side, 500 East 67th Street, the old Parkway Community House, and Dr. Burris came down of the Sovereign Museum. And she was very patient. I know sometimes, when poets start out, they be all over the place, right? So it was like I was all over the place with this poetry, to do with this particular poem, right? But she gave me she didn't say anything negative about it. And so I joined workshops. And so I just feel that I have something to say. I got a book called Quick Ass Fire Rhymes, and it's ASS with the S, one of the S's in parentheses, because the poems came real quick. And one of the poems in that book is I write because I got something to say. I write a lot because I got a lot to say. So I think writing for me is therapeutic. Writing helps me to engage myself. Some of the writings that I got, you'll never see because they went back. I moved around a lot, so you'll never see them. But to me, it made me who I am now. I don't see myself divorced of the fact that it gave me writing, especially writing, gave me a voice. Acting didn't give me a voice. It gave me a chance to get out of my uh, introvertedness. But writing actually gave me a voice, and I found my voice just by keeping writing, just writing. I didn't never study writing, but I just had a passion for reading and a passion for words, which led me to this group. So that's right.
I would say I found my voice because I was supported and encouraged by my friends and my family. Like I said, I started writing at a very young age, literally in grammar school, because I would read and I was just intrigued by some of the books that I was reading, and my mind would just start becoming very creative. And so, as a young child, probably like in fourth and fifth grade, I would create these stories, these adventure stories, and I would write them in a spiral notebook and take them to school and have my friends read them. And my friends were so encouraging. They always loved when I would bring something to school to share. And truthfully, I did that for so many years up until maybe until the time I wrote this book. I went from writing in notebooks, taking it to grammar school and then high school, and sometimes to college, letting people read it, to typing up things and sending them by email to my friends. And my friends were always so encouraging, and they still are encouraging to this day. Like, when are you going to release your next book? So that helped me feel that I did have a voice, that what I was saying was making an impact, that people were enjoying it, that they could relate. And so, and then my parents were absolutely my cheerleaders. Whatever I took up an interest in, they would be behind me 100%.
It's a good question because I think at this point I'm going through another transition.
What is
So
the transition?
I'm still figuring that one out. But because I had a voice, I mean, we always kind of do, and especially wherever that poem kind of comes from or those words, really. Um, but I think at this point, I want to figure out, I want them to end in a way that empowers. That's kind of the best way I can kind of put it, where like it can extract a certain level of energy
Yes.
from the reader or even myself, like, and then and in the end always have that silver lining, because I think that's one of the power of words or any kind of art, that you can choose which direction that you want to take things. And if you had a certain type of life and it wasn't that great, if you keep talking about the negative stuff, you just keep seeing more of that. So I've realized that it's important for me to figure out what that would look like and how I can make those type of transitions, and what words to utilize that have that kind of power and impact. So I'm still trying to figure that one out. Yeah.
You guys mentioned therapeutic, universal form. Describe to us how poetry is so therapeutic when you're writing. Every single time that you write deals with emotions. What emotions that you get? Like, I want to write a political poem. I want to write about something that happened that I saw. I want to write about the situation that happened to me at work. Explain that to us, starting with you.
So, well,
Put you on the spot, huh?
you did, yes. And well, basically, what I do is because, like you're saying, it is therapeutic. I just start writing, and so sometimes the writing may end up being a journal. And from that, as I'm starting to release, it can actually turn into a poem. But my writing isn't necessarily always about poems. Well, it's not always poems. It can be a variety of things. And it is me just being able to start to let things out of my head, to start to put things on paper. And sometimes once I'm putting things on paper, I start to see a situation clearly. There might be times that I actually write and I cry at the same time. There may be times that I write and I'm smiling because of what I'm writing about is bringing me joy or it's bringing back really great memories. So I just start by writing and I let it take its own curve from there, if that makes sense.
Taking its own course.
Taking its own course, exactly.
And I think it's similar for me. I found that it's therapeutic because I get a chance to. There's a meditation that I study called Vipassana. And one of the teachings is the premise of it is you have to, in order for you to solve your life's problems, you have to dig deep. And poetry is just that kind of. I don't just write poetry. I got a novel coming out. I got a memoir coming out. I do essays. I'm just in love with writing. That's writing is I consider writing my woman. Writing is my energy because I'm just so passionate about that. I think it takes a acting takes a second thing to that because writing just gives me a freedom to express myself and it gives me a freedom to dig at what is my problem, what is my problem with myself, what am I having a problem with today. And so it may take the form of political. If it's a political thing based on something that's happening, then I do write it. But I got some poetry in that little small book. It's a little pocket book, quick ass. Both of those are little small books. One was published in 2004, 2006, but they're books that you can carry around with you in your pocket. And I find that they help me get through my journey. Some of the stuff I've written, some you probably never see. I write it because I need to get something out. I need to get it out of me. I don't like to be constipated, and I use constipation as opposed to congestion or what do the people call it, like writer's block. Because at some point, I think that there's things that just like you have to, when you eat, you have to eliminate. Then you have to get things, you have to get at things. The only way you can solve problems is either, and I encourage people to write, even if they don't become poetry. I think you need to write stuff because you got a lot of stuff running around in your head. Dr. Wayne Dyer says we're having these 60,000 thoughts a day. That's a lot to process. And some of them, you decide, you get a chance to decide what you're going to keep, what is important to me at this phase of my journey. So at this phase of my journey, I want to, I was looking at a book that she had today in her house was called Sacred Self-Care. And that I don't think a lot of people put enough in the self-care. So at this point in my life, in this place, I'm looking at self-care, and I'm looking at it from a spiritual perspective, and I want to see if I can dig deeper and find what may be troubling me at a particular time.
You mentioned you treat poetry as a woman. Describe the woman to us.
It's sensuous, it's intellectual, it's creative, it's all the things that we're talking about. It's nourishing. It's got passion in it, and it's got sensual energy in it. Because one of the poems I'm going to read today has something to do with that. But and it's loving. And it's deeply spiritual. It's just all the things that I think we ascribe to in the world. It's political, it's social, it's educational. She's a fabulous person to be with. In the moment when people talk about loneliness. I don't feel alone. We were talking about a lot of times our creativity takes place in silence, even though we may sometimes have some little musical ambience in the background. Most of the time, so it's silence. It involves an intimate, deep longing to be understood and to be to make the choices to treat it right, to treat it and honor it.
Mhm.
Can you say your question again? Because I want to make sure I'm answering it correctly.
Therapeutic.
Mhm.
In unison,
Mhm.
you guys say
Mhm.
poetry is therapeutic. Describe and define therapeutic and how that conveys into your poem, poetry.
I don't know if it's always therapeutic. That's the I think it's actually I don't know how to answer this question too much because I've also been there's been times where I stopped writing on purpose because it wasn't helping me. Um, yes, I'm not sure how to answer
No,
that.
no problem.
Yeah.
I think
And
it's healing. I know it's healing because,
Mhm.
and you have to be truthful. You have to be truthful. You cannot heal if you lie. You cannot lie to yourself. If you're trying to get at something, you cannot. You have to be truthful. And I don't mean you just walk around with your truth on your sleeve. It's just that you got to be honest with yourself. Before you can be honest out here, you got to be honest with yourself. And poetry, all my writing gives me a chance to be honest with myself. Where do I fit in this scheme of things? And what is my relationship to all things, all being, all life? So how do I get at that? How do I understand it more so I can live up to what that means?
the difference between fiction, poetry, and real life. A lot of people write about their real life experience and also imagination. Describe the fiction and nonfiction element to poetry and in your writings.
Oh wow, you're getting deep. Okay, describe the say that again, the fiction and
And nonfiction
nonfiction.
in your writings.
To be truthful, I believe a lot of my writings when it's just coming from me, like as Umi said, when I'm in that space and I'm writing, um, it's generally what I'm dealing with. Again, what's going on in my head, what's going on in my heart. But there have been times that I have been part of, outside of this group that I'm currently a part of. I was part of a writing group that was part of the public libraries for a period of time, and we were giving writing prompts, and that is where I saw the fiction coming in my writing because it wasn't something that I was just taking from inside of me. It was something, a prompt that I was given. And I love that because then that allowed me to have another creative side, if that makes sense. And so it is a little bit of both. And now one of the things I would actually like to do to explore that fiction part more is to actually work on a fiction book. Well, it's going to be a children's story most likely, but that's one of the current projects that I'm working on. And I do have some ideas in my head because I jot down things about potential fiction books that I will write at some point once I can, just focus on writing them and working through it.
I don't know whether I don't know whether I know a lot of people who have written fiction. I used to be in one of the oldest workshops in the city, Obasi, Organization of Black American Culture. The current poet laureate of Illinois, Angela Jackson, she was a mainstay. She was one of the first younger poets. We were up in almost in the same age group, and I got a chance to sit and be around poets, Haki Madhubuti and Sam Greenlee and people like that. So I got a chance to study with them. And I don't know whether I'm looking forward to writing fiction. I've never written any short stories. I've had people, they've written chapbooks, but I don't know whether uh, I have even approached fiction yet. I think that I, uh, it's something that I'm kind of like anticipating, but uh, I see fiction as a means to be able to tell a story when looking at other fiction writers, a way to tell a story and use and merge sometimes where the lines are blurred, where you don't know. Sometimes even when actors, when you ask people, well, as far there's sometimes the standard question that actors get is part of you in this character. Well,
Mhm.
there's no way you cannot be because you got to use yourself. So I don't think probably maybe somewhere in the deep recesses of my mind, I have some fictional moments in there, but I don't I don't see it. Maybe somebody else could see it. I don't see it.
I guess I guess I would say that maybe using fiction as a way to paint reality.
Mm.
That's kind of the way I've kind of used it or incorporated within the words themselves, or depending on a particular poem. Just because there's certain things that I have no other way to describe, and especially when they kind of become a little bit more, I don't even know if the right word would be ethereal, but there's certain things that I cannot describe, but I'm having in that experience or that thought process or that energy is taking me to that. And that's the best way that I could possibly describe using those metaphors.
Mhm.
So
I know each and every last one of you brought some poems. So I'm going to go down the line and you guys, whatever poems that you have going, it's your time to shine. So starting with you, sir.
All right.
all right, I guess I'll just I wasn't really sure what to share, especially because of that transition. So I'll just go with one that I do have somewhat memorized.
You know I
I
was
might
going
mess
to
it.
come to you eventually.
Yeah, no, yeah. I just didn't
You're
know
gonna have to do it.
what to, which one, if whether I was gonna take off my phone and see one that, but I'll just do this one just because I think it kind of it is a bit of that painting of sorts. It might be fictional in a sense, but there's truth in it. And it's called "Where the Water Veins Bleed." Um, they were born in adobe shacks on villages made of mountain where the water veins bleed. Battles on soil painted in red adorned their bodies. Bodies made with sacred water, winds of the sun, light of gold, salts of the sea, fields of life, harvests of hope, elements of thought, materials of the heart. But bandits of a false god use their brothers as weapons, weapons made with hunger of spirit, twisted knowledge, and tormented emotions. Their teachings of humility deliberately hid cowardice to conquer carbon, skin, iron, blood, more minerals for exploitation. Their church of lies and laws are paper formed cages in the mind, spirit and body split in two, all strategies for war. But prepare for what always comes. Excuses change, yet the objective stays the same. But don't worry, we've never needed much, because our ancestors were born in adobe shacks, on villages made of mountain where the water veins bleed. Battles on soil painted in red now adorn our bodies, bodies made with sacred water, winds of the sun, light of gold, salt of the sea, fields of life, harvests of hope, elements of thought, materials of the heart. Thank you.
Woohoo.
What was the inspiration for that?
I was I was having a conversation with my parents and were telling me a bunch of different things from back in Mexico, and one of them they got very almost mythical or whatever, almost some of the ideas behind it. There's this tree that is supposed to kind of have a connection between the this realm and another, and the experience that they had with one of my dad's brothers, who it's its own whole story. But long story short, he ended up with sand in his pockets. He said he had gone to the beach with one of my aunts, and she was at home, so he was gone the whole night, and she was at home, so she could not have been who was with him. And also the beach is hours away and driving. So he was found under the specific tree that is known for mysterious things, and he was in the crevice of the tree. So yeah.
Sir?
Okay. This particular poem is a poem that was generated. This is a poem to my father. My
Mm.
father he never saw this poem, but we had a moment because I'm a junior by birth, but that's not the name that I wear now. And so we had a moment in his shop where I was 44 years old, and we were arguing about something about a situation. I'm not going to go into details of that about that, but I said, "You got to call me Esau now because that's my name." He said, "I don't have to call you shit. You can kiss my ass." And so this poem is a poem about that. And when I did it in a workshop, what's his name? I don't know if you know this poet. He's the only tenured poet in the city, Sterling Prompt. He used to teach at I don't know if he still has, he retired. Yeah, he won the lottery, so I think he retired, but he used to be a tenured professor at the University of Illinois Circle. And he's one of Mata Buddhi's peers. And it's called A Listening and Ascension Thing. What does a holy son do when his worldly father tells him to kiss his ass? Does he say, you can kiss mine? Does he ignite this ignorance, or does he simply let it pass? Like a waning winter's mind, like a sunflower's mission on a withering vine. Or should him stand firm within his divine omniversal essence, divine omnipresence, stand firm as a sum total of his omniversal heart, stand bright in his most highest I and I light, be like the sun on a cloudy day, be indivisibly visible, be like the sun on a cloudy day, stand aligned within the I and still rise, be like the sun and still shine.
All right.
All right. You.
All righty. This piece is called I Am More Than You See. Look at me. Look at me. What do you see? A Black woman with kinky locked hair, thick hips, big hips. I'm sorry. Kinky locked hair, thick lips, big thighs and hips. Look at me. Look past what you initially see. Do you see my heart, which is larger than life? Do you see my lungs, my ribs, my enormous brain, the red blood flowing all through my veins? You see, when you really look at me, you see that we are very much alike on the inside, which is what matters. When you take time to talk to me, you learn that we have a lot of thoughts, prayers, and dreams in common. I dream of the American dream. I wish for life, liberty, and justice for all. I want to leave the world in a better place than it is now. I want the future for all children to be bright and for all children to thrive. I pray for hungry people to be fed and each person have a place to call home and a warm bed. It doesn't matter to me what you look like on the outside. We are all beautifully and wonderfully made. Look at me. Look at me. When I look at you, I look from the inside out. I'm more concerned about what we have in common than not. Most of us have faced hardships and challenges. We love our families, friends, and want a community where we all can thrive. That is my starting point. I appreciate our differences and understand just because we are different doesn't stop us from trying to understand, care for, and respect each other. Look at me. Look at me. Next time, not only look at me, take a moment to talk to me. We can start to change the world, become more empathetic to each other, and in the end, be a beacon of light for the children who are looking, watching, and learning from us how to function in this wonderful world we live in. Look at me. When you do, I will look and smile.
All right. We'll be back right after this short break on intellectualradio.com/iHeart radio station with more poetry. We're back on the Drive at 5 on intellectualradio.com/iHeart radio station, back with the poets. And when we left, you guys had a couple of poems that you guys shared. When we go back to the moment that you discovered of each and every poem, what is the dialect that you want to use in your poetry? Some can be forceful, some could be nurturing, some could be like, yeah. Starting with you.
I feel my dialect is always nurturing and empathetic, like with the piece that I just shared. I wrote it maybe around 3 years ago, but it's just based on what's going on in the world right now. There's so much division, and I just want people to understand that we have a lot more in common. We all bleed red blood. We all have the same organs inside of us. So I am coming from currently with the work that I've been working on. It's more of a empathetic um, dialect. I want people to feel safe and to be seen and to be heard.
And I collect quotes and proverbs. One of the books I got coming out, it's a new work that's coming out in next year in the spring or the summer. It's called Umanati. And so it's a compilation of not poetry, but wise sayings and teachings and quotes and acronyms and stuff that I've collected from around the world.
Am I hearing you correctly? You said Umanati?
Umanati.
Okay, describe that title.
Well, that title came to me. It was like I was already working on these other two books to get them ready for reprinting. And like I said, I was telling my side, there was a Christian publishing company that got in touch with me, and it had been a 2-year time. They said, so they got back in touch with me like about around COVID, and they said, well, do you still want to publish something? And I said, yeah. And one of the books I was considering was the one I told you, but it's too salty for their Christian taste. So, and you know how thoughts come to you. This thought that came out of me because it was like a thought said, you got to put this out. And I said, well, I realized over the years, I collected a whole bunch of these sayings. And so, and I had given them out in different settings at home, going ceremonies and all that. So the spirit just told me, well, no. And the name just popped out. It wasn't something I had to think about. I'm always into thinking about one word titles and what that means and how to say a lot just with a few words, being economical. And so since I know about the Illuminati and Tupac put out something called Illuminati, I said, well, I looked in the word. I'm always looking and taking apart words, reading them left to right, right to left. And so I said, oh, Umi's in there. So Illuminati was what I came up with.
Okay.
Just I don't know. It was just there was a bit of definitely care for people when I wrote it, but also a little bit of anger. Not that much. Just understanding that the world kind of has this cyclical nature. That's why it begins and starts the same, but only one line changes at the end. Kind of like signifying our own continuation in this, because in the first one it's like they were born or something like I forget the last line even if I wrote it. I just kind of had to say it. But it's like and in the end it's like now it's us. Um, so I think a piece of that component, and also like the struggles that seem to be somewhat similar all throughout the cultures of the world. I actually started writing it in Spanish. I wrote most of it in Spanish, and this is the first poem I've ever written in Spanish.
Mhm.
I've never really done that, and but then I started translating it, and I realized it still made sense. But there's certain things I had to change, but I wanted to keep the same. I wanted to keep the same energy, even if the meaning was different. The technical meaning is different from the English version and the Spanish version, but I think the motion is the same. So yeah.
In one word, describe you as a poet. What one word describe you as a poet? Starting with you.
Empathetic.
Comedian.
I don't know if there's a word for it, but like always learning, something with learning, continual learn. But I don't know what the word would be. If it
Educator poet?
I don't know,
The educator?
kind of constantly learning.
Hmm.
You know, like I'm not so much an educator, but I'm always trying to learn in order to put that into
Informational poet.
something. I don't know. Yeah, one word is hard.
I see it as being, I see his poetry. We always talk about it when we're in sessions and talk, and I see it as being evolutionary. It's evolution. I see him evolving, and you can, when you listen to some of his poetry, you hear his evolution. You hear his involvement and his evolvement in terms of him as a person. I don't know what I said.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you.
I love to hear him share his poems because he knows them by heart. And it's like, I feel like I'm on a journey when he's sharing his pieces.
And I feel like he's a philosopher. He doesn't claim it, but I think I see him as being a philosopher poet. I see him as being so much more than, like I say, that we see, like the poem says.
So please give intellectualradio.com/iHeartRadio station how they can get in contact with you, purchase your book, and just in case they have a poetry slam, invite you, starting with you.
All right. Well, my book is available on Amazon. Oh, the places I have traveled, and it's a spin on Dr. Seuss's, one of his titles, because I'm a big Dr. Seuss fan. I do have a Facebook page, Oh, the Places I Have Traveled, as well. So they can definitely reach out to me.
Well, right now I don't have because I'm in an evolutionary phase right now. I'm creating a website, but right now, if people wanted to direct any energy to me, they could do it through the Writers' Right Collective. Because I feel safe and secure that that's where, because we talk about it. We're talking about what it is to publish and not just publishing anything in terms of. So I see them as being, but in the future, probably by the time the books get reprinted, I will have a more definitive personal place where you can.
I was gonna say the same thing because I don't really have one anything truly established. I have one, I guess, Instagram, but the Writers' Right Collective on Instagram. I forget the exact handle or whatever whatever that phrasing is, but that's the one that I'd like to put out there.
All right. You guys don't be a stranger to the Drive at 5 on Intellectual Radio. That's going to do it for us on this Monday evening. Thanks to Earl Winfrey, our executive producer, Wanda, who's behind the scenes. You guys have a wonderful week.
Thank you for having us.